When revenge moves quietly. People say revenge arrives like thunder. Loud. Violent. Impossible to ignore. But in Aiyetoro village, revenge arrived quietly, like a thread passing through the eye of a needle. It moved without noise. It had no dust. No warning sound. Nobody noticed it at first. Not the old women roasting corn beside the market, laughing and fanning smoke from their faces. Not the drummers entertaining drunk palm wine drinkers beneath the moonlight. Not even Chief Adetoba Adeyemi himself, the richest man for many miles across the red hills of Ijesaland. Nobody saw the threads tightening around their lives. But the ancestors did. And they waited patiently, the way rivers wait before flooding their banks. There is an old Yoruba belief that says, what a powerful man does in secret, the earth keeps in memory. The earth never forgets. And when the time is right, the earth speaks. Chief Adetoba did not believe in such things. He believed in money. He believed in power. He believed in armed policemen standing at his gate. He was about to learn how wrong he was. If you ever visit Aiyetoro during the rainy season, the first thing you notice is the smell. Wet earth. Firewood smoke. Fresh palm oil bubbling in blackened iron pots. Then comes the noise. Goats cry from wooden pens while women argue loudly over pepper prices in the market square. Children chase each other between market stalls, laughing and screaming. Somewhere in the distance, talking drums carry messages older than memory itself. Aiyetoro was not a wealthy place. The roads were not paved. There were no big hospitals or modern schools. Most families lived in small mud houses with zinc roofs that sang loudly whenever it rained. But the village had a certain kind of beauty. It had community. It had warmth. It had the kind of quiet dignity that only poor but proud people understand. During the rainy season, banana trees leaned over footpaths dripping with water. Frogs sang from every ditch. And in the mornings, before the sun fully rose, the whole village smelled like fresh earth and possibility. It was a place where everyone knew everyone. And where secrets never stayed secrets for long. If you woke before dawn in Aiyetoro, long before the lazy rich men opened their eyes, you would hear her first. The soft slap of worn slippers on a dirt road. Then her voice, strong and warm in the cool morning air, akara bigbona. Hot akara. Mama Sade walked through the village every morning with a smoking tray of akara, fried bean cakes, balanced carefully on her head. She moved with the confidence of someone who had been walking that same road for 20 years. Her slippers were worn thin from the ground. Her wrapper had been washed so many times the original color had completely disappeared. But she walked with her back straight and her head high. She was not a tall woman. She was not a young woman either. Her face carried many lines, the kind that come not from aging alone, but from carrying heavy things for a very long time. Yet whenever she smiled, people felt the warmth of it like sunlight after rain. Children ran toward her every morning with happy feet and open hands. Mama Sade was the kind of woman the village could not imagine living without. Mama Sade never allowed a hungry child to leave empty-handed. It did not matter if the child had money or not. If a small boy came to her tray with tired eyes and an empty stomach, she placed akara in his hand and waved away his apology. If a girl came holding a torn 5 naira note, Mama Sade gave her double and called it a fair price. Sometimes she gave food on credit she knew would never be paid back. Sometimes she walked home in the evening with almost nothing left in her money pouch. Yet somehow, she always came back the next morning with a fresh tray. People called her, the woman with God's heart. She laughed whenever she heard it. I am just an old woman who fries beans, she always said. But the village knew better. Mama Sade had raised 3 children on that akara money. She had paid school fees, bought medicine, and kept her household from falling apart with those same hands covered in oil. She never complained. She never begged. She only worked, and gave, and kept moving forward. But here is the sad thing about kindness. In a world ruled by powerful and selfish men, kindness does not protect you from suffering. In fact, in villages where one man holds all the money and all the land, kindness often attracts suffering faster than wickedness does. Kindness makes you visible. And being visible to the wrong people can destroy you. Mama Sade had lived quietly for many years. She asked for nothing from the powerful men of Aiyetoro. She did not go to the chief's compound to beg for contracts. She did not join any political group or play the dangerous games that gave some villagers short-term wealth and long-term misery. She minded her own business. She fried her akara. She loved her son, Tund. She saved her money in secret. And she believed, the way simple honest people believe, that if you worked hard and harmed no one, the world would leave you in peace. She was wrong. Because a man like Chief Adetoba Adeyemi did not need a reason to harm someone. He only needed an opportunity. And opportunities, for men with power, have a way of creating themselves. Ah! Chief Adetoba Adeyemi. Even his name carried weight when people said it. He was not born rich. Those who remembered the old days said he used to sell second-hand shoes near the motor park, a thin young man with hungry eyes and fast hands. But somewhere along the years, those fast hands found their way into government contracts, land documents, and powerful friendships. Now he was untouchable. His convoy of black cars raised red dust on the village road long before he arrived. Villagers came out of their houses to watch the cars pass, the way people watch a storm rolling in from the hills. His mansion sat on the highest hill in Aiyetoro like a king watching over his servants. Imported cars filled his compound. Armed policemen stood at his gate with hard faces and short patience. At night, while darkness swallowed the rest of the village, his generators roared until morning. His lights blazed across the hill. From a distance, it looked like a different world up there, bright, noisy, and completely separate from the quiet suffering below. Some people admired Chief Adetoba. Some people feared him. Most people simply depended on him for one thing or another. That is exactly how he wanted it. That is how power works in forgotten places. It does not have to be good. It only has to be necessary. Chief Adetoba understood this better than most men. He gave people just enough, a bag of rice before elections, a scholarship for one child in 10, a small job here and there, to keep them grateful and quiet. He built one classroom block for the village school. His name was painted on the wall in large letters. He donated a borehole near the market. His face was printed on the dedication banner. Every good thing he did was loudly announced. Every bad thing he did was quietly buried. And there were many bad things. Land he had taken from poor families using fake documents. Contracts he had collected from the government without delivering any work. Young men he had used during election violence and then abandoned to face the police alone. The village knew all of this. And the village said nothing. Because what can you say when the man who can destroy you is also the man who sometimes feeds you? That is the trap powerful men build around communities. Not with iron bars. With dependence. What Chief Adetoba never understood was this: the invisible people around him, the ones he walked past without greeting, the ones whose names he could not remember, the ones he saw only as obstacles or tools, those people were quietly carrying pieces of his destiny in their tired hands. Every village has such people. The old man who mends shoes near the gate and hears every conversation. The young woman who sells water by the roadside and watches every car that passes. The cleaner who empties the office waste bin and reads the papers inside. Powerful men believe that importance makes you visible. They forget that invisibility gives you power of a different kind. Mama Sade was one of those invisible people. She walked past Chief Adetoba's gate every morning. His policeman had stopped checking her tray long ago. She was just the akara woman. Harmless. Irrelevant. They did not know what she knew. They did not know what she was planning. They did not know that 7 years of quiet suffering had slowly, carefully, built something much stronger than anger. It had built a plan. The trouble truly began on a Thursday evening. The sky was angry that day, the way Aiyetoro skies sometimes get before a serious storm. Dark clouds gathered heavily above the village, so thick they turned afternoon into early night. Sharp winds bent the banana trees near the stream until the leaves nearly touched the ground. Market traders packed up early, covering their goods with plastic sheets and hurrying home. Mothers called their children in from the yard. Old men looked up at the clouds and murmured things under their breath. Everybody felt that something was coming. But they assumed it was only rain. Except the dogs. Every dog in Aiyetoro was restless that evening. They paced the compounds. They whined at nothing. They barked at corners where no one was standing. Dogs always know first. They sense things moving in the invisible world long before humans do. If anyone had listened to the dogs that Thursday evening, they might have stayed inside their houses a little longer. They might have held their children a little tighter. They might have checked their farms one extra time. But nobody listened. And so the evening moved forward, carrying its destruction quietly. Mama Sade was inside her small kitchen that Thursday evening, blowing air into a weak fire. The wood was damp from the humidity and the fire struggled, spitting smoke into her eyes. She was patient with it, the way she was patient with everything. Then she heard footsteps. Tund entered the kitchen carrying his old school bag, which had a broken zip that she had mended twice with thread. He stood in the doorway looking at her with that expression she knew, the one that mixed hope and guilt together. "Mama," he said quietly, "my teacher said university admission forms are out." Mama Sade looked up from the fire immediately. Tund Adeyemi was 20 years old, tall, and quiet in the way that serious people are quiet. He had finished secondary school 2 years ago with good grades. But university cost money, and money had been scarce. She had watched him waiting patiently, working odd jobs, never complaining. She had watched and she had saved. For 2 years, every kobo she could spare had gone into her secret fund. "We will buy the form," she said firmly. Tund looked at her carefully. "With what money, Mama?" Mama Sade did not answer immediately. She adjusted the pot above the struggling fire. She wiped her hands on the side of her wrapper. Then slowly, she pointed toward the back wall of the kitchen, in the direction of the small farm behind their house. Tund followed her gesture and waited. "Behind the cassava ridges," she said softly. "Go 3 steps past the big root on the left side. Dig down 1 arm length. There is a metal container." Tund stared at her. "Mama, 7 years," she said simply. That was all she needed to say. Tund understood. For 7 years, his mother had been waking before dawn to fry akara in hot oil. For 7 years, she had been skipping meals so there would be enough food for him. For 7 years, she had walked those same roads in those same worn slippers, refusing to buy herself new ones. All of it, every early morning, every sore foot, every skipped meal, was moving toward one goal. His university education. His escape from poverty. Tund sat down heavily on the kitchen stool and put his face in his hands. He did not cry. But it was a close thing. Let us stop here a moment and truly understand what 7 years means for a woman like Mama Sade. 7 years of rising at 4 in the morning while the village was still dark and cold. 7 years of grinding beans by hand, mixing the batter, heating the oil until it spat, and then carefully dropping each akara ball in with skilled fingers. 7 years of loading the tray on her head, hot, heavy, and smoking, and walking those roads before the sun came up. 7 years of smiling at customers even on days when her knees ached and her back screamed for rest. 7 years of giving on credit she knew would never return, because she could not watch a child go hungry even when she herself was barely surviving. 7 years of every naira saved being put aside, not for herself, but for the dream she carried in her chest like a second heartbeat. She wanted Tun to go to university. She wanted him to wear the kind of shoes that did not wear through at the bottom. She wanted him to sit in an office someday, behind a desk, never having to carry anything heavy on his head ever again. That was the treasure buried beneath the cassava ridges. 7 years of love shaped like money. But at that exact moment, while Mama Sade sat in her smoky kitchen pointing toward her buried treasure, something was happening far above the village. Up on the highest hill, inside Chief Adetoba's bright, air-conditioned house, papers were being signed. The chief sat at the head of a long table. Around him sat men in suits and men in traditional wear. Contractors, government officials, a lawyer with a fat briefcase. The bulldozers will move tonight, one contractor said, spreading a large paper map across the table. His finger traced a wide red line. The red line passed through the south side of the village. It passed through the market. It passed through the small residential area behind the houses. It passed directly through Mama Sade's farm. What about compensation? Another man asked carefully, glancing at the chief. Chief Adetoba's laugh filled the room. It was the kind of laugh that contains no humor, only power. Compensation, he repeated, like the word was a joke someone had told badly. By the time villagers finish running from office to office complaining, construction will already be at the halfway point. Everyone around the table laughed with him. Everyone except one old man near the window. His name was Elder Sool. He was the oldest person in the chief's inner circle, and also the quietest. He had been sitting in rooms like this one for 40 years, rooms where powerful men made decisions that crushed small people. Rooms where maps and signatures moved faster than the suffering they caused. He had never fully stopped any of it. But he had never fully become comfortable with it either. Elder Sool looked away from the laughing table and gazed through the window at the storm building over the village below. Lightning flashed once in the far distance, silent from this far away, like someone taking a photograph. He thought about all the small houses down there. He thought about the women who would wake up tomorrow and find government notices on their doors, if they were lucky enough to receive a notice at all. He muttered something under his breath. The man beside him leaned over. "What did you say, Elder?" Elder Sool shook his head slowly. But what he had said was this: when elders conquer the land remembers. Nobody heard him properly. And nobody listened. They came before sunrise. Mama Sade was already awake. She was always already awake at that hour. She was in her kitchen beginning the long process of grinding beans when she heard the noise. At first she thought it was thunder. But it was too steady for thunder. Too mechanical. Too purposeful. She stepped outside. Far down the road, yellow lights moved through the dark like large, slow animals. The ground vibrated faintly beneath her slippers. Then came the cracking sound. The sound of wood and earth being pushed and broken. Her neighbor, Baba Khalad, appeared at his gate in a wrapper hastily tied around his waist. "Bulldozers," he said, his voice strange and hollow. "They are clearing the south land." "What south land?" Mama Sade asked, even though a cold feeling was already moving through her chest. "The farmland behind the houses. From the stream to the road junction." Mama Sade turned very slowly and looked toward her farm. The yellow lights were moving in that direction. The cold feeling in her chest became something heavier. She began walking toward the farm. Then running. Her worn slippers slapped the ground fast and hard, and the cold morning air rushed past her face, and she ran even though some part of her already knew she was too late. She arrived at the edge of what used to be her farm and stopped. The cassava plants were flattened. The carefully kept ridges she had spent years building and maintaining were pushed into long, broken lines of red earth. The banana trees she had planted along the fence were crushed and twisted, lying at strange angles like broken arms. The large bulldozer was still moving at the far end of the land, its orange warning light spinning slowly in the dark. Mama Sade stood very still. She did not scream. She did not cry. She did not run toward the machine waving her arms, the way some of her neighbors were doing in other parts of the clearance zone. She simply stood and looked at the place where her 7 years were buried. And then she began to calculate. How deep had she buried the container? Was it possible it survived the bulldozer? Or had the heavy metal tracks crushed and scattered everything? She walked forward slowly into the churned earth. The ground was wet and soft beneath her feet. She found the general area, she knew these ridges by heart, even destroyed, she could read the land, and she bent down and began to dig with her hands. She dug for a long time in the dark. The container was still there. By some miracle, the bulldozer had passed close but not directly over the spot. The earth above it was disturbed but the metal box below was intact. Mama Sade pulled it out with trembling hands. She sat in the ruined earth with the container on her lap. Around her, other villagers were shouting, crying, waving papers at government officials who had arrived with clipboards and blank faces. She opened the container. The money was inside. Damp at the edges but mostly fine. Notes bundled carefully in plastic bags, the way she had packed them. She counted quickly with practiced fingers. It was all there. But the farm was gone. The farm that she used to grow extra food to sell. The farm that gave her fresh vegetables through dry season when akara sales fell. The farm she had quietly planned to expand once Tund went to university. It was gone. Not just the physical farm. The sense of security it represented was gone. The feeling of having something solid beneath your feet, of belonging to the land you worked, was gone. She put the money back in the container. Closed it. Held it against her chest. And she finally allowed herself to think clearly about what must happen next. Tund found his mother still sitting in the ruined farm when morning light arrived fully. She was sitting on a mound of upturned earth, her dress wet and dirty, the metal container resting in her lap like a child. She looked completely calm. That calm frightened Tund more than tears would have. "Mama." He crouched beside her. "Mama, come inside." She looked at him. "The farm is gone." "I know. I heard. Come inside." Chief Adetoba's people did it. Government order. No warning. No compensation. Tund had already heard from the neighbors. The story was already running through the village like water finding its fastest path downhill. Houses had been marked for demolition. Farms cleared. Families given nothing in return. All so Chief Adetoba could build a new road. The road, it was said, would benefit mainly the businesses he owned on the far side of town. "Mama," Tund said carefully, "we still have the money. You saved it." The money is for your school," she said immediately. Her voice was firm. "Nothing changes that." Tund was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Something has to change, Mama. What he did was wrong. We can't just." "I know," she said. "I know." And the way she said it told Tund that she had already begun. Mama Sade was not the kind of woman who sat down and accepted injustice quietly. She gathered information first. She spoke to every affected family. She counted 23 households who had lost farmland or property without compensation. She wrote down names and amounts in a small exercise book with careful handwriting. Then she went to the local government office. She was told to come back Thursday. She came back Thursday. She was told the officer was in a meeting. She waited 4 hours. She was told to come back Monday. She came back Monday. She was given a form. The form asked for documents that nobody in the village had: original land certificates, government survey papers, registered deeds. Land that families had worked for 3 generations. Land passed from grandparents to parents to children. Nobody had paper certificates. In villages like Aiyetoro, land ownership lived in memory and community agreement, not in government filing cabinets. She went to a lawyer in the nearby town. The lawyer told her the case was possible but would take 2 years minimum and cost more money than she had. She went to the newspaper office. The editor listened politely and then said he would look into it. Nobody looked into it. Mama Sade returned to the village with a calm face and burning eyes. But Mama Sade had not been idle during all those weeks of failed complaints. She had been watching. Chief Adetoba's new road project required many things. It required equipment. It required fuel. It required workers. It required suppliers. And it required people to look the other way when certain things were not done properly. Mama Sade walked her akara route every morning. She listened. She observed. She remembered. The construction manager, a man named Femi, bought his morning akara from her every day. He talked freely because she was just the akara woman. Harmless. Invisible. He mentioned contracts. He mentioned names. He mentioned money that had been approved by the state government for villager compensation, money that had arrived but had never been distributed. He mentioned, without understanding what he was saying, exactly where that money had gone. Mama Sade listened to every word. She did not change her expression. She placed extra akara on top of his portion and smiled at him. "You are a loyal customer," she said warmly. "I always give extra to my loyal customers." Femi laughed and walked away feeling good about himself. He had no idea what thread he had just placed in her hands. Over the following weeks, Mama Sade became a very careful collector of information. She was not the only one. Other invisible people in the village began helping her once they understood what she was doing. The shoe mender near the gate passed on things he overheard. A young woman who cleaned the government office brought out a copy of a document that showed the compensation money, over 4 million naira, had been redirected through a company linked to Chief Adetoba's nephew. An old man who worked as a night watchman at the construction site described cement bags with government markings being loaded into private trucks. A teacher who had attended one of the chief's political meetings wrote down what was said there: promises made and broken, figures discussed, names mentioned. None of these people were lawyers. None of them were journalists. None of them were powerful. But together, they were building something that had more strength than power. They were building truth. And truth, when it is properly organized and placed in the right hands, becomes something that even the richest man in the hills cannot simply bulldoze over. Mama Sade organized everything in her exercise book. Names. Dates. Amounts. Witnesses. Then she looked for the right hands to place it in. It took time to find the right hands. Not every journalist was honest. Not every official was willing. Not every organization had the strength to stand against a man like Chief Adetoba. But Mama Sade was patient. She had spent 7 years saving money with quiet discipline. She could spend a few more months finding the right ally. She found him eventually, a young investigative journalist named Lanra, who worked for an online newspaper based in the state capital. He was not famous. His publication was small. But he had a reputation for 2 things: accuracy and stubbornness. He had written about corrupt contracts before. He had been threatened twice and had published anyway. Mama Sade sent Tund to find him. Tund brought him to the village on a quiet weekday morning, and Mama Sade sat with Lanra under the mango tree in her compound and placed the exercise book in front of him. Lanra read for 20 minutes without speaking. Then he looked up at her. "Where did you get all this?" "From the people around him," she said simply. "The ones he never looks at." Lonra was quiet for another moment. "This is serious," he said. "If we publish this, things could get difficult for you." Mama Sade smiled calmly. "Things are already difficult for me." The article published on a Wednesday. By Thursday morning, it had been shared over 10,000 times on social media. By Friday, 2 national newspapers had picked up the story. By Saturday, a government anti-corruption agency had announced they were opening an investigation. The story contained everything. The redirected compensation money. The names of the shell company. The cement bags. The construction contract given to a company registered to a family member who did not actually exist. The government official who had signed the clearance for the bulldozers without following proper procedure. And at the center of all of it, Chief Adetoba Adeyemi. His name was now not just heavy in the village. It was heavy on the front pages. His phone, people said, rang continuously for 3 days straight. His lawyers drove up the hill in a long convoy. His government friends stopped answering his calls. His photograph, the big one in his office, the one where he wore traditional dress and looked like a dignified leader, was photographed and placed next to the article. In the village, something shifted. The people who had always bent their backs when his convoy passed began to stand a little straighter. The people who had always spoken his name in careful, quiet voices began to say it plainly. Justice in Aiyetoro did not arrive like a movie. There was no single dramatic moment. No public speech. No handcuffs on the village road. It arrived slowly, in pieces, like the rains that fill a dry river gradually until it flows again. The government investigation confirmed the missing 4 million naira. Families were compensated, not fully, not quickly, but eventually. Mama Sade's name was on the list. The amount did not replace 7 years of work. But it helped. Chief Adetoba was asked to appear before the Anti-Corruption Commission. He appeared 3 times with different lawyers. The cases moved through the slow machinery of the justice system. He was not immediately destroyed. But he was no longer untouchable. His business partners became cautious. Government contracts stopped flowing his direction. Young men in the village who used to line up outside his gate looking for work or favor stopped coming as often. Something had been broken. Not his wealth. Not his house on the hill. But the most important thing he had built over many years. The belief that he could do anything to anyone and face no consequence. That belief was gone. And in a village where power lives in people's imagination as much as in bank accounts, that was a serious kind of defeat. Tund got his university admission. He went to study engineering in the state capital, carrying a small bag in the quiet confidence of someone who knows exactly what their education cost. Mama Sade continued to sell akara. She still rose before dawn. She still balanced the tray on her head and walked those familiar roads. She still gave extra portions to children who came with not enough money. But something had changed in the village. When her tray appeared in the morning, people greeted her differently now. Not with pity. Not with ordinary neighborly warmth. With a kind of quiet respect that is given only to people who have fought and not been broken. The old women by the market called her Aya Alafia, the mother of peace. She laughed at that too. "I am just a woman who fries beans," she said, as always. But the village knew better. They knew that the most powerful thing she had ever done was not the article, not the evidence, not the investigation. It was the 7 years of silent, determined love she had poured into the earth of that farm, love that a bulldozer could disturb but could not destroy. The thread had passed through the needle. And the ancestors, watching quietly from wherever ancestors watch, were satisfied. Until next time, subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss another story like this.